Hello everyone. Today we will be learning about how to integrate our MySQL databases with Golang. This video already assumes that you have installed MySQL and a MySQL Workbench or some other MySQL manager. The first thing we will be explaining is how different coding languages interact with the same database. Okay, let's suppose if we want to connect MySQL with Golang, right? Now, you might be wondering, how do we do that initially, right? Well, that's the thing. You can't. This is because Golang doesn't have the necessary skill sets or libraries in order to communicate with the MySQL backend. However, with every single language, there's always a connector for that certain language. Using a MySQL connector, you will be able to properly interface with your Golang application. Okay, so the first thing we want to do before we start any form of coding is to install the necessary connector. Now, unlike Python where you have to download it manually, you can actually get the Golang connector done via the command line. Simply type in go get -u github.com/go SQL driver /MySQL and just hit enter. Now, as you can see, it runs it and it runs it and it doesn't show any form of errors. That means that we have now successfully installed MySQL. Now, before we get into the code, let's first learn how to design databases properly. Now we will be exploring our how to make proper databases. MySQL is a relational database. That means that every single table is connected. Observe. Now, as you can see over here, we have two tables. One is a table for users and the other one is for posts. As you can see, both tables have the column of name. These two names are common within both tables, as a result are connected. All MySQL tables need to have some sort of connective column in order to keep them organized. Because if there isn't, then there will be no proper way to organize the databases and connect them together. Observe. Let's suppose if I'm working on a delete feature for my app. Now, currently, all I have to do is delete from users and from posts where the name is equal to and whatever the given name is. However, if my tables were not organized using this method, it could lead to some data being not deleted, and as a result, it could lead to errors or fatally crash the system altogether. Okay, now we are finally ready to start writing some code. So I've already written some boilerplate code for this main.go file that we have. I've simply just imported the database library, the format library, and the GitHub driver that we installed earlier. The first thing we're going to do is open up our database manager and make our new schema. So I'm just in MySQL Workbench. I'm going to create a schema. I'm going to call it go db, like so. Okay. Or actually, I don't think we can use hyphens, so I'm going to go Golang db, like that. And I'm just going to hit apply. Close. As you can see, now we have our very own schema, which is basically where our database will be. Now we need to insert data. So the first thing we're going to do is open up our SQL, we're going to connect to MySQL. So we're going to create two variables, db and error. Error is simply meant so that if there's any sorts of errors happening, we will be able to figure them out. Otherwise, because in case if you guys don't know, MySQL is very hard to debug, and this is the Golang's way of getting around it. So we're going to use the declarative statement, and then we're going to just go SQL.open, and it's going to be it's a MySQL database. All right, and then we're just going to simply open it up. So first, you're going to write the name of your the name that was on your database. So like mine is root. Then we're going to write in our password. So my password is just new password. Then we're going to simply write, it's a TCP server. So basically what that means is that if you're, okay, don't worry too much about that. If you are using a local MySQL server on your machine, just use a TCP server because that's what it is. Next, you're going to connect it to the host of your database. Now, for most machines, it's usually just the local host with the 3306 port, but depending on various computers, it might be different. So 127.0.0.0.0.1 3306. Okay, and then we're just going to write the name of our database, which is Golang DB. Okay, now the next thing we're just going to do is just check for errors. So I'm going to be like, if error is unequal to nil. So nil just means no value, right? So we want to see if there is a value, then we want to panic the code, and we're just going to want to print out the error itself. Okay, now the next thing we're going to want to do is create a string called query. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a string called query that's going to have my SQL query in it. And what's going to happen in that, and then we're going to simply just execute that query later. So I'm going to create a table. So create table if not exists, and it's going to be called users. And it's going to be a name, and it's going to be a varchar, which simply means string, and it's going to be a string 500 characters long. That's the economical standard. And then there's going to be a password, which is another varchar of 500. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Now the next thing we're simply going to do is execute that query. So we're going to create another variable called create, error, and it's simply we're just going to write a declarative for db dot, and we're going to go db, which we made earlier, and we're going to execute the query. Okay. Oh yeah, and then we also have to write the whole if error is equal to nil, panic. The next thing we're going to want to do is just print out create. Personally, this is necessary just because Golang is so strict on variables not having no purpose, which it does make a good point on, but it gets annoying after a while. So you're just gonna have to deal with it. We also need to create our post table, so we can just do that by just copy pasting again and just refactoring some of this code. So we're gonna call it post, and it's going to be called a name and the post. So let's make our post 5,000 characters long. And we're just going to remove the declarative operator because this has been created before. So now what we're going to do is, now we've written this code. Now we're going to run it. Oh, sorry. But before running it, we also need to close our database. So we're going to use the defer, and then we're going to be db.close. So we use defer because we want defer to happen last, because we don't want our database to close while we're still halfway through our SQL queries. All right, so that's why we write defer.close all the way at the end. Now let's run run main.go. So as you can see, we get these two memory addresses. That just means that everything's working. Okay, now let's just see our work. So if we were to just go into Golang DB and load, or let's just refresh this. Okay, and then now we're just going to go to Golang DB and tables. So as you can see, we have a post table, which has name and post, and we have a users table, which is also just name and the password. Okay, well now we have successfully created tables. Now the next thing we will be working on is inserting data into our databases. Okay, now we will be inserting our data into our database. So I've created a new file, and I've had the boilerplate code for connecting, and I've also just made an open connection. The next thing we're just gonna want to do is write defer db.close. Okay, now we're gonna be inserting into our users data, users table. So in order to do so, we can simply just create two variables called exec and error. All right, and it's just going to be equal to, and it's going to be db dot query, or query. Yeah, we're not going to use db dot execute anymore because now we're communicating with tables. We only use db dot execute when we need to create tables or communicate with the database itself. All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to just type in our normal SQL query. So insert into users, and then our name, comma, password, and we're just going to insert the values of, we're just going to insert two question marks. And the reason why we're inserting question marks, and I'll explain that in a moment, is because then after the quotation mark, we're going to have two brackets. Like we're going to have two brackets with our values. So we're going to have Clark Kent, Clark Kent, and the password will be Superman. So you might be wondering, why don't I just add these values directly here? Well, that's not good practice because there's this thing called SQL injections, and basically what hackers do is manipulate your code, but by simply adding the variables outside, we can actually prevent some SQL injections. So it's better to be safe than sorry. We're just going to add the simple if error in equal to null. All right, and we'll just print out exec. fmt.println execute. Okay, so this should work. So I'm just gonna run it. So go run. Yeah, okay, go run part2.go. Okay, so as you can see, there's no errors here. So that means that everything should be working. Now I'm gonna open up my SQL workbench. I'm gonna refresh it. Next, I'm going to click on users and select the rows. As you can see, we can see Clark Kent and Superman and Bruce Wayne and Batman that I inserted earlier just to test out the database. So as you can see, this database connection works with Golang. In our next video, we will be learning how to structure data from our database and present it using structs in Golang. Hopefully you've benefited from this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.